everybody. Welcome to Nite Callers Radio. Tonight we have a very special guest. We're going to try and see if we can get the intro to go here.
Oh, the intro didn't go?
The intro didn't go.
I'm making it go now. Okay.
Okay.
During the 1960s, the small rural town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, was plagued with sightings of a large man-like winged creature over 8 feet tall. It was said to have had a wingspan of over 10 feet wide. Over 100 people claimed to have encountered the winged beast. Not long after these sightings, the legend of the Mothman was born. Join Nite Callers Radio tonight with their very special guest, Jeff Wamsley, America's foremost authority on the Mothman.
Welcome, everyone, to Nite Callers Radio. It is January 10th, 2010. Happy New Year once again. I'm Laurie Phillips, and I'm here with Luke Gross and Lauren McGlory. And we do have a very special guest tonight, Mr. Jeff Wamsley, and we're going to get to him shortly. Right now, I want to find out how Luke and Lauren are doing. Are you guys staying warm?
Oh, yeah. trying to, anyway.
Yeah.
How about you, Lauren?
Yep, I'm doing very well. Very well.
I know that I have stayed with Lauren, and they keep a very warm house. Both her and Ricky don't have any meat on their bones, and they have to stay warm.
It's got colder, so we've had to turn up the heat around here. We don't even sleep in the bedroom. We've been sleeping on we have a futon, and we just take the mattress off of it and sleep in front of the heater.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Big house. It's fun. It's like a big slumber party.
Wow. Well, it has been cold. I'm telling you, I don't know when this Arctic. I think this Arctic blast that has settled down on us, and this high pressure system is finally moving through, though, and it's starting to warm up gradually every day. I'm ready for it too. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm ready for it too. I think going to Alabama last weekend gave me broke me in for it, but I wasn't ready for another week of it. So I was like, oh my gosh, but it's, I guess it is better than 7 degrees in a tent. I do want to apologize for last week for being just so darn exhausted, but it all turned out well, I think. I listened to the show. It wasn't too bad. So anyway, we appreciate everyone hanging in there with us, even though we weren't able to do one live from the field. And so as we are going, I think Luke has some news. Luke, you got some Bigfoot news to tell us?
Yeah, I do have some Bigfoot news. Well, the BFRO, they recently brought to light some film footage of a possible Sasquatch. The film, it was shot in IMAX film in 2006 for a documentary called Great North. At the 9-minute and 20-second mark in the film, it shows a herd of migrating caribou crossing a river, and just as the first part of the herd crosses the river, there's a dark object that raises up out of a low-lying area, and it kind of lumbers forward a few steps, and then it drops back down out of sight. Mike Hall, he's an investigator for OregonBigfoot.com, says there was possibly 2 of them in there, because there appears to be a small dark object that pops up behind the first one after it drops down. It looks like whatever it is hunting the caribou, actually. And so it drops, the little object drops back down. And but Autumn Williams is keeping an update with the story, and the enhanced footage can be seen there on her blog site, and it can also be seen on YouTube. So it's a pretty interesting piece of footage. I would let everybody go. I'd say everybody go take a look at it and see what they think. Maybe get some
There are
feedback.
grizzly up in that part of the country, though, aren't there?
Mm-hmm. And that was matter of fact, that was one of the questions that was brought up to Autumn. Actually, it was, well, there are grizzly up there, and I've seen bear in the wild. Now, I haven't seen grizzly in the wild, but this doesn't look like a bear to me. But I'm not going to say it's a Sasquatch, but it's definitely interesting. So everybody go to Autumn's blog and take a look at what's going on over there. She's got some enhanced footage there, too. So
okay.
That's the news for today.
I wanted to let everyone out there know that not only are we going to have this year, we are going to touch on other paranormal subjects besides Bigfoot, Sasquatch, but also we are going to try to interview at least 1 to 2 researchers from every state this year. So if you know somebody that you think would make a great guest to represent your state, please let us know. And you can contact us at nitecallers@live.com. Is that the right address for the email?
That's it.
That's it. Yes. And so if you have someone in mind that you think would be a great guest to represent the researcher end on Nite Callers for that state, just give us a suggestion, maybe give us their email, we can contact them or whatever. I have been searching and have found several to represent several states, and I'm real excited about it because a lot of people are anxious to tell what's going on in their state, or at least in their area of the state. So I think that'll be real interesting for all our listeners to get kind of a varied idea of what is going on out there, the commonalities and the differences from state to state. As you know, Bigfoot has been seen in every state except where Hawaii. So hopefully, I haven't found a research organization for Rhode Island yet. I don't think there is one. But anyway, does anyone else have anything to add before we go on to our guest? Hello?
Hello? No, not here.
Oh, I thought I dropped out. This darn phone. Okay. I do want to go ahead and open up the phone line for JB. He's with us tonight.
Thank you.
Hey,
actually,
JB.
I'm getting no audio on the Blog Talk, so I'm horning in again.
Oh, that's absolutely fine. You know, this we could always use your help. So if we hit a quiet spot, you just jump in. Okay?
I got you.
Okay.
Thank you. Meanwhile, I'll try to not sneeze.
All right. Oh, do you have a cold?
No, but I sneeze anyway.
Okay. Well, I'll try not to cough. I am doing better than I was last week.
You're doing
It's like
fine,
now I've got a tickle right as the show's starting,
And you've got a great signal tonight, by the way.
Oh, do I? Do I sound good?
You sound great. Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, maybe this phone will do well tonight. I hope so. I hope I don't fall out. Okay. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our guest. It was mentioned at the very beginning of the program that in the 1960s there was a small rural town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and it was plagued with sightings of a large man-like winged creature over 8 feet tall and said to have had a wingspan of over 10 feet wide. Now, that had to have been a terrifying thing to see. Over 100 people claimed to have encountered this winged beast. Not long after these sightings, the legend of the Mothman was born. So tonight, we are welcoming America's foremost authority on the Mothman. His name is Mr. Jeff Wamsley. Jeff, are you with us right now?
Yep, I'm here. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm trying to stay warm, just like everybody else.
Oh, so where do you live?
Actually, I was born and raised in Point Pleasant, and but I live in Ohio, right across the river in a little town called Gallipolis, Ohio. And it's the sister city to Point Pleasant, just right across the river.
So you were born and raised in Point Pleasant. How old were you when all this was going on, if you don't mind me asking?
I was about 5 years old. My mother still lives in Point Pleasant, and a lot of my family and everything.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is from over here in Gallipolis, so we live over here. But I was about 5 years old when the Mothman stuff started really happening quite a bit, and about a year later, then the Silver Bridge collapse. I remember more about the Silver Bridge collapse than I do the actual Mothman sightings and stuff.
So this made quite an impression on you, only being 5 years old. Did they try to protect you from what was being said, or?
Well, not really. As I got a little bit older and stuff, and got in junior high and high school, and of course I read John Keel's book. And, I was kind of fascinated with the fact that a lot of the people in that book, I actually knew who they were. And I thought, well, it's kind of neat that all this stuff, took place in literally my own backyard, because, a lot of those sightings and everything happened just a few miles from, where my mom still lives in the house that I was, born and raised in. But
yes.
It was kind of a unique situation, because it was just one of those things that I started getting interested in, and I thought it'd be kind of neat to talk to some of those people that were involved. And naturally, there's a lot of them who won't talk about it, who kind of shun the publicity and things like that. But I was lucky enough to make a few connections here and there, and kind of present a couple books that were more of a documentary type deal,
Yes, you've written a book, Mothman, Behind the Red Eyes, and you co-authored Mothman, The Facts Behind the Legend. Right,
yeah.
Okay, I have to ask you this, and we're discussing this before the show began, that is the true facts of the Mothman anything like the movie that came out?
Well, the movie was loosely, and I use the term loosely, it was loosely based on John Keel's book, the Mothman Prophecies.
Yes.
John Keel, quick background for people who don't know who John Keel was. He was a writer, author out of New York City, who, when all this stuff started happening back in the fall of '66, he used to travel around and sort of like what you guys do, investigate different paranormal things, different sightings, and I had the chance to work with him a little bit on my books. I had to get his permission and things like that to use some of his stuff. But long story short, he heard about this, this Mothman activity going on, and he came to Point Pleasant to investigate, for himself. And over a 2-year period, he went back and forth to New York and kind of documented everything and kept written records and stuff, interviews with all the different people, and then he put everything into a book. Now the book didn't come out till 1975, and there were other books that came out too, but his is the most famous book. But the movie itself, the Mothman Prophecies, is sort of a modern version of what happened in '66. And it starred Richard Gere and Laura Linney and Will Patton, and it like I said, it took some of those events. Not of them are all true to what Keel's book represented and everything, but as we talked, the book did open up the floodgates pretty much for people who were interested in that kind of stuff, and they're like Mothman Prophecies, and then they get on the internet and start looking, and then maybe come to the Mothman Museum and kind of investigate all this stuff, So it's the movie was more of a mental thriller. I think it was one of those movies that you had to sit through and think. You know, it really wasn't a Jeepers Creepers type movie. You know what I mean?
Oh, thank goodness.
You know,
that's so creepy, Jeepers
and I hate
Creepers.
to say that, you know, a lot of people here, especially in Point Pleasant, were expecting that. You know, they thought, you know, they're going to do a movie about Mothman, you know, and he's going to, you know, fly over the cars and stuff like that, which, you know, was all documented, you know, but it was more of one of those movies where you had to kind of sit there and watch it a couple times really to digest everything that they were talking about. But it's the movie's still in pretty heavy rotation. I mean, you know, it's on TV all the time. And, but I do get asked that question a lot, you know, about the movie versus the real story.
Okay, well, I'm sure that you're going to tell us the real story today, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Well, and Luke, I know that you have a ton of questions, so jump in whenever you're ready. I have to ask this: was there actually any prophecy to the Mothman appearing?
Well,
do you think there was a correlation?
The bridge collapse in the movie is what's really portrayed in as far as any type of prophecy. I've talked to a lot of those original witnesses and stuff, and they just had a lot of weird stuff going on and happening to them. But, you know, the Silver Bridge, you know, collapsed a year, well, actually 13 months to the day after that first Mothman sighting.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it killed 46 people. It was a horrible tragedy. But in the movie, that's what's portrayed as the ultimate, you know, ending to the story and everything. Now, you know, it's kind of a mixed bag of opinions here. You know, I can talk to these people and they'll say, well, I really don't think these Mothman or Big Bird or Sandhill Crane sightings, there's all kinds of theories as to what it was, you know, had anything to do with the Silver Bridge, you know, collapsing, whatever. But there were a few that I've talked to that said that, you know, they thought that it was ironic that after the bridge collapsed, a lot of your sightings and stuff kind of waned, you know, kind of subsided a little bit and everything. But yeah, I get emails from people daily that see stuff all over the world, you know. Now, whether that's related to what happened here in Point Pleasant, it's hard to really, you know, validate something like that. They describe about the same thing, same description, and things like that. And so it's I think people, you know, still see stuff that may have been what people were seeing here, you know.
Yeah. I can understand.
Wasn't there a supposed curse put on Point Pleasant, Jeff?
Yeah,
what was this curse, and where did it all begin?
Well, that was a curse put on the town of Point Pleasant by a Shawnee Indian chief called Chief Cornstalk. That happened, you know, over 200 years ago. There's debate on that. There's some historical evidence that it really happened, and there's other people that claim that it was nothing but a playwright from the 20s that somebody came up with. But what had happened was Cornstalk and his son both were murdered by some white settlers over a land dispute. And when this happened, the story goes that up on his dying breath, you know, he bestowed a 200-year curse on the town of Point Pleasant. And all this stuff with the Mothman and the Silver Bridge. You had a jail explosion back in '76, killed like 5 people, 2 inmates and 3 of the sheriff's deputies. You know, that was all within that 200-year time frame and stuff. That goes way back, you know, to your Native American Indian stuff here. And Point Pleasant has a real rich history of a lot of the Native American Indian stuff, you know. But yeah, of course that was never mentioned in the movie. I don't think that.
No.
Was. But yeah, that's and you know, some people feel that, you know, that this town is, you know, has had its share of, you know, tragedies and stuff, which I think all towns do, you know. But that the bridge collapse, you know, that's people all over the world, you know, remember that.
Well, how many? Oh, go ahead, Lori.
No, you go ahead. That's fine. I was going to tell him to go ahead and tell us the real facts.
Oh.
But before that, you might want to ask him a question. Go ahead.
Well, it was just, you know, you have the how many people witnessed or claimed to have encountered the Mothman in that area.
Well, the first official sighting was November 15th, 1966. Between that time and a year's period, there were over 100 documented sightings with the sheriff's department, the news media. But the way I always looked at it was, due to these people being made fun of and laughed at and called crazy, there were probably, I would say, another 100 at least. I've talked to people all the time, that said they saw stuff up there, but they never wanted to go to the authorities or the sheriff's department or anything because they just figured they'd be laughed out of town.
That's pretty much the way it is with the Bigfoot community also.
Right. Even today, with the technology and the internet and all that kind of stuff. This was 1966 and 67, which was a very, conservative time, especially here in a town like Point Pleasant, But, I like, for example, that second book that I did, that Behind the Red Eyes, I had 2 really solid interviews set up in addition to the ones that are in there that backed out just days before it was time to,
go to print.
Talk. Yeah.
Oh, my.
And I've known these people all my life, and I was like, I think that's the reason that those 2 books have done well is because it's a word-for-word account, from them. There's no embellishment or there's no fiction that I've added in there, which, John Keel did add a few things here and there, but, but his book is a kind of a different genre and stuff. But
he took a little bit of creative liberty, where yours is more of a...
Yeah, and he admitted that, But, I asked these people, I'm like, what's the deal? Because we had this set up, and they're like, I just got a funny vibe about that whole thing, and just don't want to talk about it anymore, And I was kind of disappointed, that happened, but what could I do?
Yes.
But, and it's, like I said, there was a broad range of people that were seeing this thing. It was young people, it was older people, respected business people. As a matter of fact, one of those people that I told you that backed out told me that right after this happened and they saw it, it was her and her mother and her grandmother all in the cars, saw it, and said as soon as they came home and were distraught and, upset, their dad told them point blank, I don't want to hear anything else about it ever again, because he was respectable, had a respectable business.
Mm-hmm.
And he figured, hey, they're going to think my whole family's a bunch of kooks and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
So you have that ridicule factor that plays a big part in a lot of the stuff that, like you're talking about too, the Bigfoot stuff and all that, Sasquatch. But so, right off the bat, in 1966, conservative, small town, Mayberry, USA. Pretty much. That's what a lot of people compare Point Pleasant to. You got these people seeing this giant, some people thought it was a gigantic bird. Other people, described it as a creature type thing. And then you had a lot of people coming in saying it was just nothing but a barn owl or a sandhill crane. And, they didn't know what they were seeing. They couldn't really rationalize what they were running into. And, but I still talk to those original witnesses, and there's some that have never ever granted an interview, and they won't grant an interview. They'll go to their grave with their story, And I've tried to sit down with them and say, look, the world literally wants to read about this, to see, you were there, you saw, what happened, and
yes,
they're like, I'm done talking about it, it's not worth it. So.
Well, basically, would you say that almost every one of them described exactly the same thing?
Pretty much. That's the reason I think the whole Mothman story has some validity to it, because you had over 100 reported sightings. Most of them were reporting a 6 to 7 foot tall man-like figure with the wingspan, like we mentioned, 10 feet. Some said it was longer than that. Red eyes. That was the most common description was. That they said it had glowing red eyes, and that it seemed to be just as curious about them as they were about it. Most of the people that saw it didn't stick around too long, you know. They weren't sitting there wanting to take pictures of it or anything. They were pretty terrified, you know.
Yeah.
So.
But they never smelled anything.
What's that?
They never smelled anything around it, or.
Well, the first night that happened with the 4 people in the car, Linda Scarberry and her husband Roger, and there was another couple in the car with them. They went immediately to the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's deputies went back up there with them to the TNT areas where a lot of your sightings were taking place, and I'll explain pretty much what all that had to do with the story and stuff. But I've asked them that. Was there any type of smell? Was there any type of stuff left behind, like hair, feathers, droppings, whatever and stuff? The sheriff's department went back up, and they did see a few footprints, around the building up there. But I don't really think they were probably had the attitude as a week from now nobody's even going to be talking about this, and what's the use? You know what I mean? And
exactly.
they were wrong. So.
Well, I just went blank. Like, do you have a question real quick?
Yeah. You were talking about the TNT area. That's where. Is that where the first sightings took place with the 2 couples? Was the TNT area?
Now there's actually a few documented sightings before the 15th of November in a town called Clendenin, West Virginia, which is about maybe an hour and a half away. I've got all the newspaper clippings from that. 4 guys were digging a grave in the latter part of the afternoon and said this. They said it looked like a winged man flew over top of them. That was all documented.
Oh, my goodness. Can you imagine seeing something like that? That would just blow my mind. I mean.
Yeah, and that was in some of the newspapers, but I think, the first sighting here in Point Pleasant on the 15th of November is the one that really kind of captured the headlines and stuff, But you had people. It was real concentrated there for a while. But the TNT area, I should explain basically. During World War II, the military came in and built an installation site. It's the same company that built Area 51 and Roswell and stuff. They built 3 sites around the country. One in Point Pleasant. They went to Tennessee and built one. Then they went to did the Area 51 deal. But this was the TNT area got its name because it's where they manufactured bombs and explosives for World War II. Okay. And it was a massive operation. You had the North and the South power plants, and you can see some of those pictures, I think, on the website. But it was basically a city within itself. It was operating 24/7, top secret stuff. You've got over 100 igloos up there, which when we do the bus tours, we go to some of the igloos, and those are where they stored all this ammunition and explosives and stuff. Today, it's a wildlife preserve. Anybody can go up there. It's public property. But during the 60s, all the kids would go up there, and once World War II ended, they just pretty much just vacated. They left the building standing and all that. Now, the buildings that I'm talking about were torn down in the early 90s, but in the 60s, that's where all the kids would go up there and drag race and stuff like that. But this North Power Plant is where, right outside of this big 3-story big building, with the smokestacks and all that kind of stuff, that's where they first encountered this thing. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and as they were, just up there riding around and things, and Linda Scarberry, did that exclusive interview with stuff in the first book, but she said they just coming up the road, and they thought they seen a man standing in the road, and as they got closer, she said they realized that it wasn't a man, and she said it had wings, almost like an angel up behind its head, wrapped around the back of its head, and she said they just kind of looked at each other and was like, what is that? And she said it just kind of looked at him for a minute, and then it wobbled. She said it didn't run like an athlete would, but she said it wobbled.
Kind of like a penguin would.
Well, like maybe an ostrich. You know, she said it was a very awkward run, but she said it was about 7 feet tall, and she said they startled it, you know, when they came along in the car, but they watched it run towards that North Power Plant building. That's when they kind of got a little, you know, weary. They thought, well, you know, would that be somebody dressed up trying to scare us or whatever? So the real excitement starts whenever they head back into town. TNT area is about 6 miles out of town, out of the city limits there. What's ironic is Linda and her husband all lived within 2 or 3 houses of my house, you know, where my mom still lives there and stuff. So it was.
So you've known these people a long time.
Yeah, and the other couple won't talk about it. They still live in Point Pleasant, but they won't speak of any of it. They'll admit they saw it, but that's what they won't talk about it in detail. So as they came back out and hit the main highway and started into town, Linda said she looked out the window, and as they turned the curve to hit Route 62 to go back in town, because they were scared at this point, you know, they just didn't know what they had saw, so they wanted to go in and at least tell somebody. But as they come back on the road, she said they saw it again, just like it was standing there waiting on them. She said it just looked like it was standing there like, I knew you guys were coming this way. What's the big deal? She said it flapped its wings once and went straight up into the air, and they lost sight of it. And when they got onto the straight stretch, that's when she noticed it over top of the car. And the other three, you know, they were all kind of upset at this point because they didn't realize what it was. But she said it flew over the car, but it wouldn't get in front of the car, which makes a lot of people think that it was maybe afraid of the headlights or whatever.
Right.
But she said it had muscular legs like a man, because she looked out the window and it was right over top. And I think one of the most chilling things that she ever told me is, I said, well, you know, how big do you think the wingspan was on this thing? And she said, well, it would flap its wings once or twice and glide that fast. She said they were doing about 90, 95 miles an hour down this highway. And she said the wingspan was so big that when it flapped its wings, they could hear the tips of the wings hitting the bottom of the car door, making a thumping noise where it was slapping the side of the car door. That's when they really got a little, you know, concerned and stuff. But
can you imagine?
They stopped at a little hamburger joint right at the end of our street called Tony's Drive-In. And they knew the owner. His name was Gary Northup, and they trusted him. They didn't really know if they wanted to go to the police or not, because they figured they'd get laughed at and everything else. But she said they stopped there and they ran in and they told him what they had encountered. He called the sheriff's department and said, "You guys need to get up here. These kids are scared." That's when the sheriff's department and deputies went back up there with them, and that started a whole rash of sightings. You know, for the next year, people were seeing it in the daytime. But a lot of the people were seeing it up there in that TNT area. So they thought that if it was some sort of a bird or a sandhill crane, that it was maybe roosting or staying in the top of that building, the North Power Plant building, because that was just a massive generator plant. It was empty,
We have a couple of questions from the chat, Jeff.
Okay.
Lancelot Link asks, Jeff, what about the missing evidence of Scarberry's so-called scratch-clogged car?
I asked her about that, and she told me, because I would have loved to have seen it too. When I was 5 years old, I remember playing out in the front yard, and Roger, who was her husband, they weren't married yet. They just recently got married when they saw this thing. But maybe a few months before, I remember him working on that car all the time, It was one of those 57 Chevy Bel Airs. It was a black one, had black and white interior. And back then, instead of the rear end being jacked up, it was the front. And I always thought that, it was kind of cool looking. I was just a little kid. But I asked her what happened to the car because, I thought, well, did they? And she said they showed the sheriff's deputies the car because she said that the wings, did dent and scratch up the side the doors, and Roger was mad because he just had the car painted and stuff. But shortly after all this happened, he was drafted to Vietnam, and then they divorced. I don't know how long after that, but she said she just sold the car. You know, it would have been nice to have seen some pictures and stuff, but that was, you know, so long ago. And there again, they probably thought, well, this will pass over here in another month or two. But she said that she sold the car after he went off to Vietnam and stuff. So who knows where the car is now.
Well, Dreamwolf asked, how many states have had sightings? Is Texas in that group?
I think so. Yeah, New Mexico and especially down in that area and stuff.
Really?
I get emails from let's see, where was it? Over in Europe, different places in Europe.
Does there seem to be a concentration in any one area? Anything like Point Pleasant?
Not really. You know, there was always a theory that in Point Pleasant there was more than one. The reason that people think that is, at least with Linda, was that the fact that they saw it run into the North Power Plant, and 5 minutes later, a couple miles down the road, they saw this other one just standing there looking at them like it knew, you know, where it was going to be.
Well, if it could keep up with the car going 90 miles an hour, it probably just flew ahead of
She said it was effortless. It wasn't flapping its wings like a bird would, you know, trying to keep up. She said it. There's been some comparisons to a pterodactyl, you know, and a prehistoric type bird, you know, with that big monstrous wingspan, and they just flap it once, and you know, it just glides the whole time and everything. I've heard every theory you can think of. I mean, I even heard theories that it was actually a military experiment up there in the TNT area where they were using the jetpacks. Which was
going to be one of my questions next.
Yeah. Jetpacks and all that kind of stuff, you know, guys flying around up there, you know. It's hard to tell.
Well, we're going to take a short break and go to Footers, and we'll be back shortly. So, Jeff, don't go away.
Okay, I'll be here.
Everyone will be back in just a moment.
And now here's some information about the upcoming Oregon Sasquatch Symposium.
June 19th and 20th, 2010 will mark the first annual Oregon Sasquatch Symposium in Eugene, Oregon. Speakers such as Autumn Williams, Scott Nelson, Ron Moorhead, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, David Rodriguez, Cassie Moskowitz-String, Solly Shepard-Walford, Cliff Garakman, Jaime Avalos, and Tom Powell will be only some of those in attendance. The OSS was designed for Oregon researchers and witnesses to come together and discuss the implications of Sasquatch. Tickets for the symposium are on sale now. For more information about the OSS, go to the website at www.oregonsasquatchsymposium.webs.com.
And now, here she is, our very own link girl, Lauren McGrory.
Hello, everyone. This is Lauren McGrory, bringing you your weekly footers. This one's called Encounter with the Mothman. I have a cold right now, so I will try to muddle through this and not stumble over my words. I'm sorry. Okay, here's the story. In the mid-1960s, a mysterious creature that became known as Mothman frightened residents around Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Described as having large red eyes and enormous silent wings, the creature has become a legend in the area, and sightings are claimed to this very day. In the summer of 2005, Matt and his stepsister encountered something unknown, and they wonder if it was a Mothman monster. This is Matt's story. My stepsister Lynn and I were visiting her grandparents in West Virginia. Her grandparents' house is in the middle of the countryside with a 20-acre cornfield next to it. About 50 yards behind the house lays miles of forest. The first night we were there, we were unpacking and getting ready to go to sleep. There was a bunk bed in the guest room, which our younger siblings were going to sleep in. There was a couch and a pull-out bed in the living room, which Lynn and I decided to sleep in. We were channel surfing on the TV, and we flipped to a show about urban legends in the United States.
Since my stepsister and I have always been interested in paranormal happenings, we decided to stop and watch for a few minutes. Something came on about a creature called Mothman. According to the show, sightings of Mothman were said to mostly be in Virginia, where we were, and Kentucky. So my stepsister and I looked at each other with our jaws dropped because we always seemed to believe in these sort of things. The next morning we were messing around with a soccer ball. My sister is on a soccer team, and she brings her soccer ball wherever she goes. My stepsister punted the ball into the cornfield. Oops, she said. We searched for hours and hours, but we could not find the ball. No matter how hard we looked, my sister was beside herself, because it was her favorite soccer ball. The next night, Lynn, our siblings, and I were all watching television in the living room. Suddenly we heard a tremendous crash on the roof of the house. We all let out a yelp of terror and dashed under the hideaway bed's covers. Then we heard footsteps, loud footsteps, as if something abnormally large was romping around on our roof. Our parents came into the room with wide eyes and asked us if we dropped or broke something, but froze when they too heard the footsteps on the roof. My stepdad went over to the window and gazed out to the cornfield, which for some reason looked particularly ominous that night. As he looked, he saw our sister's soccer ball drop from the roof. He looked down, not knowing quite what it was because it had fallen so quickly. He ran outside and brought the ball inside. I grabbed the ball, smiling from ear to ear, happy to have it back. My stepdad and stepmom went back into the other room, after saying goodnight. Suddenly my sister looked at the ball and she frowned angrily. Furious, she said, "Look!" We all looked at the ball and saw 4 perfectly round holes in it, 2 very large holes about the same size of a quarter, and about half an inch from those holes were 2 little holes about the size of dimes. It gave me the chills, and suddenly I had a recollection of the show that Lynn and I had watched the previous night. We looked at Josh and Ashley, our younger siblings, and told them to leave the room. Griping and groaning, they trudged off to their room. I looked at Lynn and said, "I know this sounds stupid, but could this be Mothman?" She let out a snort and said, "Don't be stupid." Nothing else peculiar happened that night, but stranger things were yet to come. For about a week, things went quite peacefully. By the next Thursday or Friday, we had forgotten all about the entire incident with the soccer ball. In the morning, we woke up and had breakfast. After washing the dishes, we wandered into the cornfield. After romping for about 5 minutes, we began to hear rustling noises in the corn crops nearby. We looked at each other and froze. Within a few more seconds, we heard a screeching and howling sound, somewhat similar to nails on a chalkboard. We fell to our knees, covering our ears. After it stopped, Lynn was so scared. Tears were streaking down her cheeks. "We have to go back," she sobbed. We heard the noise start up again, and she let out a scream and we dropped to our knees again. The noise seemed to be coming from up above us, and before either of us had time to think about it, we looked up and saw something dart past us, quick as a flash. Being on our knees in a cornfield, we didn't get very much of a glimpse of it at all. It had to have had a wingspan about 10 feet. We both agreed later on it had a human-like figure with enormous wings. As we were running back to the house, we stumbled upon a baby deer, barely alive. We both let out a gasp and leaned closer to the deer. Lynn shouted, "Oh my God," and turned pale. What, I said. I looked to where she was pointing. I saw 4 perfectly round holes in the deer's abdomen, just like the ones in Samantha's soccer ball. We ran back and told the story to our family. They didn't believe us, and they probably never will. Though it was too real not to believe, it still haunts Lynn and I to this day. Okay, that's really creepy. If y'all find a story like this, something interesting or creepy, or like on this, or Sasquatch, or any other interesting cryptid story, you can send it in to us, and we'll put it on for the next Footer segment at nitecallersatlive.com. And if you want more info on the Nite Callers team, you can check out our webjam, www.webjam.com/NiteCallersRadio. That's NITE_callers_radio. And check out our MySpace too. It's www.myspace.com/NiteCallers.
If you've been a part of the Nite Callers listening audience for some time now, I'm sure you've heard our interviews with Bill Bean. Bill now has his own program on the Shadow Talk Radio Network called Keeping the Faith with Bill Bean. Bill is a gifted speaker, writer, theologian, and a survivor. If you're looking for inspiration, be sure to listen to Bill's show on the Shadow Talk Radio Network at 9 p.m. Eastern Time every Sunday night at www.wfixfm.com. Again, that's www.wfixfm.com.
Okay, we're back with the show, and that was a very interesting footers, Lauren.
I'm curious to where that happened.
Yeah, Lauren, do you know where that happened at?
Hold on, give me a minute, and I'll look for it.
Okay.
I get emails almost daily, like that, from different people and stuff, and
have they ever been known to make a noise like that, screeching?
Well, there again, I asked that in a lot of those interviews if they heard a noise. The only noise that was ever quoted in Keel's book was one of them said it almost sounded like a mouse squeaking.
Uh-huh.
That was from that wasn't from Linda. I don't think it was from maybe one of the other witnesses that saw this thing. But never anybody was ever harmed physically.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was ever attacked or clawed or anything like that. There was a lot of mental issues, with
exactly.
people
I
that saw
would
this
imagine.
thing. When I first started working on that first book, and I, started getting a few calls and visits from people that knew, that I was working on these projects, and they wanted to, to come and tell me what they knew about it and everything. But, one of the things that happened with that first book that was kind of convinced me that they weren't making this story up. I mean, just for the sake of making it up and getting some attention. But I had a lady who came in to talk to me one day. I had a chain of record stores at the time, and we carried some Mothman shirts and things like that. She came in and bought a shirt, and actually, I think this was maybe after the first book was out. But she asked me if I believed their story, their accounts and everything, and I said, well, there was too many people seeing the same thing, describing the same thing. I don't know how. If it was just 3 or 4 people, I could see where people would be pretty, weary of their story. But she looked at me and she said, well, I can tell you what. She said, I was a nurse on duty that night that happened at Pleasant Valley Hospital. That's a hospital just about a mile down the road from my house over in Point Pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I was there when they brought those 2 women in and treated them for shock, which I never knew any. I never knew any of this. Linda had never told me any of this or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what are you talking about? And she said, well, I was an emergency room nurse, and she said those 2 women that were in the car that night, they brought them in and treated them for shock. And I was like, whoa, I had another nurse who about a year later also verified that same story. And she said that the hospital security basically locked that hospital down when they brought them in there because they didn't know, what actually was going on or anything. And, in order to be treated for shock, you definitely have to be upset about something, And her words were that they were literally bouncing off the walls, is what she told me. She said they'd definitely seen something that scared them bad enough to where they had to bring them to the hospital and stuff. So. And then, of course, I asked Linda about it. I said, is that true? And she said, yeah. I'm like, how come you never told me that, And she said everything just, kind of happened so fast and stuff, But
exactly.
And, and a lot of those people just clammed up, after all that happened. The other couple that was in the car with them, they'll never talk about it.
It is miraculous that anybody even said anything, because back in the 60s,
yeah.
We didn't have all the media.
Right. Exactly,
and all, the desensitizing that we have nowadays on the paranormal. So, it's amazing that people were even coming forward at all.
Yeah, especially back then. Like I said before, it was a real conservative time, and you just didn't run into your local sheriff's department and tell them, that you just seen a 7-foot man with red eyes and wings and flying around the TNT area and stuff, a lot of the people here in Point Pleasant still to this day, they always called it the Big Bird. They just thought it was a gigantic bird of some sort. They called that North Power Plant up there the Birdhouse. And but you had a professor come in from West Virginia University. He said it was nothing but a sandhill crane. That kind of offended a lot of those witnesses, because they told me, they said, well, I know what a sandhill crane looks like, and it wasn't a sandhill crane. And there's a few of those witnesses that claimed that it was a bird, that it was the biggest bird they'd ever seen in their life. So you have different stories, as to what it actually was.
Well, Lauren texted me just a moment ago. She said that they said it happened in West Virginia, that they were not.
Okay.
Not
Virginia.
Where?
Virginia.
Yeah, it might have been in the northern state of Virginia. It's the same terrain and everything.
It really surprises me that people are seeing them in other places, even today. And have there been any sightings of the Mothman around Point Pleasant since then?
Well, the last interview that I did with somebody was in the late 80s, late 80s, and this was from a very reliable source. He went into detail. He said something was over top of their car up there in the TNT area as they were coming out of there. But I always still run into different contacts and different people, that have seen stuff like this and everything. They're getting harder to find, especially some of the original witnesses. That was 45 years ago almost, And if they were in their 30s or 40s then, they're getting up there in age now. So.
Well, did they get together a monster squad with loaded guns and go?
Yeah, they did.
They did. Wow.
This is what happened was everybody piled in their cars and drove to the TNT area, and my mom said, "Yeah, your dad took us up there." Of course, I don't remember it, but my dad actually worked up there. The National Guard Armory was up there in the TNT area at that time, and he never seen anything, but he always thought that they were telling the truth. He didn't think they were making any of this stuff up. But yeah, people were in the media jumped on it. You had news crews up there, and what happened was they had to put a stop to it because there were people taking guns up there. They were going to shoot it or whatever, and hanging on a trophy wall there and all that kind of stuff. And so immediately when the National Guard or whoever stopped it, then that's when all the conspiracy stuff started popping up. Well, they're just trying to keep us out up here because they're trying to hide something, and it just added fuel to the fire, I think. And but yeah, that's exactly what happened. They were up there, shooting and all kinds of stuff. It was just a time for people to be curious, and instead of going to the drive-in or the movies, let's go up to the TNT area and look for Mothman.
Well, of course, I would be up there first thing,
Yeah, there's people still up there. There's people still up there.
Who coined the term Mothman?
That term actually came from one of the news reporters, I think, here at one of the news conferences that they were having. During that time, they took that name from a character in a Batman comic book, and it's weird. I just got a comic book off of eBay there a few weeks ago that had Mothman in it. I scour the internet and eBay and everything looking for stuff like that for the museum. And I thought, that's cool, I'll get it. Well, I got it, and the copyright date on it was November 1966. It was weird.
Wow.
And I emailed the guy that sold it to me, and this would have had to have been printed, before it all happened, because,
Exactly.
The street date on it was November, so it was probably printed 4 or 5 months before. But that's the story behind that name. Is one of the reporters just kind of nicknamed it Mothman because people said it had wings that resembled like a moth wings and stuff like that. But people here always referred to it as Big Bird or the monster, and stuff like that. But
Jeff, JB here. Just an observation. The moth. I've wondered about the term Mothman quite a bit because moths, of course, have a different flying characteristic.
Right.
Large birds tend to minimize the flapping and maximize the soaring.
Exactly.
Moths and hummingbirds.
They're always flapping. Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with the eyes too. Moths have kind of big eyes, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So we have a guy that comes to the festival every year. He collects moths, real ones, and has them in the frames and everything. And I always buy one off of him and put it there in the museum and stuff. But yeah, it's. I mean, people around here were referring it to as Satan himself. You know what I'm saying? And it almost took on some biblical connotations and stuff.
Well, I can imagine.
People.
Has there been any comparison between this and other large birds, other than the brief mention you made earlier, like the thunderbird, things like that?
Yeah, the thunderbird. Kind of Keel talked about that a lot too. These Native American Indian drawings on the caves and stuff like that of these, thunderbirds. He talked about that a lot too, and I forgot about that. But yeah, the thunderbirds and Indian, depictions of these giant birds flying, and then you hear a lot about that down here in Texas and areas like that. You read about that.
That amazes me. I would have never thought anything like that would have been seen in Texas.
Yeah. There was back in '76, I think, down there in Texas. One of them birds flew down and tried to pick up a kid.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That was on Monster Quest, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, but it was a Thunderbird, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They thought. Yeah.
Now Monster Quest came and that's supposed to air in this spring. I just talked to the producer the other day. They came back in October, I think it was, and spent about 2 weeks here and at the museum and up in the TNT area and everything. And
are you going to be on the Monster Quest?
I probably will be. Yeah.
That is so cool. That is so cool.
We've done a lot of documentaries and a lot of TV shows, and it's been pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty interesting, to work with some of those. The Monster Quest is a biggie, though. I mean, I always had people call in an email and say, when's this going to be on Monster Quest? And I'm like, I've never been approached by anybody. And then, sure enough, got an email from the producer.
Doug Highcheck.
And they came, like I said, and they always have the two different sides of the story. The skeptical version and then the version of the witness accounts and things like that. So it should be interesting. And I always tell people that too. I mean, I'm not out to convince anybody of anything. I mean, I just know, the people that I've talked to, I know they saw something up there. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. Now, what it was is a whole different ball game. Trying to exactly, prove exactly what this thing was, because those people today are still dumbfounded. They just can't rationalize, what they saw. They can't really come to a conclusion.
No, there have been reports I've read of people, especially at night, seeing a large, dark, upright being beside the road with long wings. And they primarily describe them as bat-like wings in that they're not feathered; they are skin-covered.
Yeah, that, and as far as that happening today, I mean, there again, I get emails and stuff like that all the time. Some of those people describe those wings as a bat-like leathery look to them, but then other people said it looked like a light grayish feather, like a dirty white, dirty gray type feather. One lady saw it broad daylight, with her brother and her sisters, and she's on a lot of the documentaries. She might even be on the Monster Quest. I don't know if they interviewed her or not, but she said that it had like a dirty gray look to it.
Okay, well, you continue hearing the pterodactyl comparison.
Yeah, now I heard that from one of those witnesses, the one that backed out on me, at the last minute. Her mother, and her grandmother were up there in the TNT in the daytime picking greens, for like a salad, the stuff you make salads out of and stuff like that. And because a lot of people would go up there, and I remember my mom going up there and getting all those. I can't even think, cattails or whatever they call them, to make like home decorations with and stuff. Cause, you go up and get that stuff. But this lady told me that, that all she remembered was her grandmother just running full speed across that field, and she said this thing came up from behind, over top of her, and she thought it was going to come down and hit her. That's how big it was. And she said it had every bit of a wingspan of 10 to 12 feet.
That's just got to be.
Yeah, and she said all she could remember was her grandmother had a bonnet on, and she said she seen her grandmother just trucking across that field and that bonnet flying up in the air and this thing over top of her. And they wouldn't even let the kids out at the grade schools at that time, for a while, because they were afraid that if it was some sort of a big gigantic bird of some sort, it might come down and sweep down and pick one of them up or whatever. But
10 or 12 feet sounds like a lot, but with an 8-foot body, it's going to take at least that long to enable flight.
Yeah, and I'm sure in the excitement of the moment and everything, what I mean.
Yeah.
It's hard really to get a real accurate description, especially at nighttime and things like that. But Tom Urey, he was the guy that was in the car just about a week later, driving on Route 62, right in the exact same area they saw it, and he thought it was a helicopter at first. Out of the corner of his eye, he said it just came straight up over the hillside, and then he told me, he said, I knew it was a bird, but he said it was gigantic, and he said it just started circling his car as he was driving, and he said every time it would circle, it would get closer, and that's when he started getting a little worried, and he went and called the sheriff's department. And
those poor sheriff, I can imagine.
Yeah,
their
and
job was like beyond
what's
the call
ironic
of
about
duty.
that whole thing is the sheriff at the time, his name was Sheriff Johnson. He just passed away last year, and he would not talk about it to anybody. His family, his grandkids were coming to me doing book reports on this stuff, and I said, "Who's your grandpa?" And he said, "Well, he was a sheriff." And I said, "George Johnson." And he said he won't even talk about it to him. He doesn't want to talk about it anymore or anything.
Oh my goodness!
Well,
but there again,
interestingly enough, many of the reports I read tell when these beings launch, they go straight up, like as you mentioned.
That's what Linda said. She said it just one time. She said it flapped its wings once and went straight up into the air, and she said it just didn't look real, And
almost like it was on a rope.
Yeah, and she said it just went straight up in the air, just like it was just effortless and stuff. But those descriptions she talked about.
Oh, can you hold that thought? I'm being asked to go to intermission. I think someone needs a bathroom break.
Okay.
So we're gonna go to a short intermission song. I have Henry on the line. Henry, I promise I'll get to you right after the intermission. We also have some questions from the chat. So everyone, hang on. We'll be back shortly.
Well, everyone, it's time to take a break. Everyone here at Nite Callers Radio certainly hopes you're enjoying our interview with Mr. Jeff Wamsley, America's foremost authority on the Mothman. Remember, everybody, we'll be taking calls after the break, so be sure to pick up the phone and give us a call. The number is 646-716-4530. Again, that's 646-716-4530. We'll be right back after this song by John Paul Keith and the 145s, Looking for a Thrill. Everyone here at Nite Callers Radio would like to thank each and every one of our listening audience for coming in and listening to our show, downloading our archived shows, and coming in and joining our chat room and participating in our show. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. Thank you so very much. And now back to Mr. Jeff Wamsley, America's foremost authority on the Mothman.
Okay, everyone, we're back with Nite Callers Radio. I have Henry on the line, so I'm going to go ahead and bring him on since he's been patiently waiting. Henry, are you there?
If the switchboard is working, yes, I am.
Hey, Henry. I'm sorry. You called in a little bit too early. We really couldn't interrupt our guest.
I did. That was my bad. Yeah, I know my computer's acting up a little bit. Must be that Mothman curse.
Yeah.
Oh, don't say that.
Yeah, the Men in Black.
Yeah, if you ask Lauren Coleman about whenever he's been on the show, usually something will break, or he'll break a light bulb or something like that.
Yeah.
Or
he cut his hand at one time, too, I think.
Yeah, I've read about that, yeah. Anyway, I want to say hello, Laurie, hello, Lauren, hello, Luke, and hello, Jeff.
Hey. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, wanted to ask you, is there a difference between the Mothman and the Thunderbird? Because they seem to have almost similar descriptions, and they seem to be seen in similar parts of the country.
That's a great question.
That's a tough one in a way. Are you there? Okay, my phone just cut out that time. Okay. I think the Thunderbird... Okay, I can't hear anything.
Can you hear us? Hello?
I'll hang loose. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear us, Chris? Oh, my.
I can barely hear you.
Oh, no. Do you want to hang up and let me try to call you back?
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I can hear you now. It just seems like it's just cutting in, and that's what it did that one time when I was telling you at the beginning of the show. I don't know if that's on your end or mine. Yeah.
It's a Mothman
curse. Cold, Jeff. That's what it is. It's Indrid Cold. He's interfering.
It might be. I know that Keel referred to the Thunderbirds, quite a bit and stuff. I when I did my stuff, I had, talked to him a few times and asked him about that. And I think there could be a comparison because most people here in the Point Pleasant area really aren't real familiar with those Thunderbird sightings or anything like that. But if you do read the descriptions and the way they, their characteristics and where they appeared and things like that, I think there could be a direct connection, to it. But I know in several of those interviews with Keel, he brought up the Thunderbirds, and there again, Point Pleasant has a rich history of Native American Indian, and that's what I always think of when you think of Thunderbirds, that the Indian paintings and all that kind of stuff on the caves and everything. But I would think that there's probably some sort of a connection there.
Well, what do you think about, and I'm just going to interject a question real quick that I've been pondering before I forget it. You remember the question I couldn't remember earlier? This is it. And so I would like to ask it before it leaves my brain again.
Okay.
What do you think, could there be a comparison between Jersey Devil and the Mothman?
I do get that a lot, too, from emails and things like that.
Is there really any difference in their appearance?
I've watched a few of the shows on the Jersey Devil and everything. Of course, some of that stuff dates clear back into the 1500s, doesn't it? I mean,
yes.
Some of the origins or whatever. Yeah. I think the whole story, with the Mothman, it's an open book as far as comparisons and everything. But I do get a lot of emails, about that, asking about, if there could be a comparison, to the Jersey Devil.
Well, Lancelot has a question from the chat, and I want to just hang in there, Henry, and let me get this question real quick. What is the real story regarding the TNT igloo storage?
Well, those igloos, there's about 100 of those that were built during World War II, Only about 3 of them are open to the public. You can actually go into a few of those and look around. But they get their name because they were built just the way Eskimos build igloos out of ice, but they just used, the concrete blocks. But those were disguised from the air. You can't see those, or you couldn't during World War II if Japan or Germany or whoever got over here and flew over Point Pleasant. They were disguised where you couldn't see them from the air. Right now, those ones that are sealed, those igloos that are sealed, are leased by private companies, and nobody really knows what they store in them or anything. But there wasn't a lot of Mothman activity around those igloos. There was a few sightings in that area, but those are about maybe a mile, half a mile away from the North Power Plant. But it's really eerie. A lot of people, we had Paranormal State came last year about this time. And of course they did their filming and everything, but they also come back for a field trip type thing. And
did they bring Chip Coffee?
Yeah, he was there. Yeah.
Oh, I would love to meet that man.
Yeah, they had all their equipment and everything set up in the igloos up there and stuff. It was pretty neat. And,
did they get anything that you know of? Or?
Not that I know of. I know all their batteries went dead. As soon as they turned everything on, everybody's batteries just were zapped.
Oh, wow.
And they kind of freaked out about that. But,
yeah, I bet.
he spent a lot of time in the museum. He came in and just kind of hung out there at the museum and stuff.
Who, Chip Coffee did?
Yeah.
Oh, I bet that was interesting.
Yeah, he was. He's an interesting person and stuff. He came.
Yeah,
in,
he is.
And
he really is amazing.
What happened was they didn't really publicize this because of, maybe for security reasons or whatever. But he was in the museum. This was on I think a Saturday afternoon, and he left. He said, "I'll be back in a little bit." And this kid walks in and says, "We got to talking." I said, "Well, I said the crew from Paranormal State's here this weekend," and he freaked out. He said, "Is Chip Coffee with him?" And I said, "Yeah, right there he is. He's just walking out the door." And this kid, you would have thought the Beatles were in there or something.
I would have probably acted the same.
Yeah, he freaked out, And I said, "Well, right there he is. If you want to talk to him, he's leaving. He'll be back in a minute." And that kid just, that made his day.
Oh, wow,
I bet
it
neat.
did.
Yeah.
Well, Luke, did you have any questions? You sure have been quiet.
Well, yeah, I have some questions. Let's go to the darker side of the Mothman story. There were sightings, supposed sightings, of men in black and UFOs being seen in conjunction with the sightings, or supposedly in conjunction with the sightings of the Mothman.
Right.
Were any of them? Was these stories ever explained? Did people, what was found out about that?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I probably should have talked about that at the beginning. But before the Mothman stuff started, there was a slew of UFO activity in the Ohio Valley in general. Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio. That was just an everyday thing. People were seeing this stuff like every night, And some people felt that the UFO activity and the Mothman stuff and these men in black were all kind of intertwined a little bit. These men in black started showing up after people started going to the newspapers and the media and things like that. And Keel himself was always just really paranoid about all that, I mean, it was to the point where, I would talk to him on the phone just, he passed away this past July. But it got to the point where I would call him or he would call me and we would be talking on the phone and
in code.
No, we just talked. But he told me it got to the point where he went to the maintenance guy in his building there in New York, in his apartment building, and made him show him the phone network because he always felt that somebody was even just recently tapping in on his phone lines and phone wires and stuff. But I always got a sense that he was always looking over his shoulder and stuff. But Mary Hire is another important name too. She was the local newspaper reporter here in Point Pleasant, and when John Keel came to town, they kind of joined forces. They were sort of like Batman and Robin or whatever, and they would have roundtable discussions with all these witnesses and people who had seen it and people who'd been approached by these men in black and stuff. Well, these men in black would frequent her office downtown there in Point Pleasant and just come in and tell her point blank, that you need to cool it and stop putting this stuff in the papers because you're just causing a lot of people to panic.
Oh.
But they did it with a demeanor that was a little threatening. They made it clear to her that they weren't real happy with her. But she said that she never knew who they were. They couldn't really identify themselves. She didn't know if they were government or CIA or military. And the weird thing about it is this was in 66, 67, and then she died.
And they were dressed in black, and were they also driving a vehicle that was completely black?
Yep. And
wow, that is creepy.
She said they would walk into her office, and the reason that she thought it was odd is because most people in Point Pleasant didn't dress that way. They didn't look like that or anything. And, it's hard to get people to talk about those men in black encounters because they were kind of few and far between, but I have talked to a few people that were approached by them, and they said she said they would walk in and pick up a pencil and stare at it like they had no idea, what it was or anything. She's just very peculiar behavior, and she told John Keel that the thing that stuck out to her the most about those guys were they would never blink their eyes. They would just stare at her. They would never blink. So that brought in these theories of, the UFOs, alien type, stuff. And, but, I have talked to people that run into these. And just last year, my mother came into the museum. We were standing there talking, and in the museum there we have a mannequin as you walk in the black trousers and the black hat and stuff like that, stand there to greet you as you walk in. And my mom said, what is this supposed to be? And I said, well, this is a kind of a representation of these men in black. And she said, oh, I remember them. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, yeah. I said, well, I've done 2 books, and you never told me this or anything. And she said, yeah, during all that going on, she said, I would see him downtown here in front of Mary Hires' office all the time. And I thought,
But Jeff, they knew what the pencil was. They didn't understand the eraser.
That might have been it. That might have been it.
Well, I wanted to jump in with a couple more questions, and then have the Monster Quest update, the ever important Monster Quest update.
Yes, go ahead, Henry. We didn't mean to run off and leave you. I apologize for that.
Oh, it's okay, no problem. Yeah, my second question is referring to. I'm sure you're familiar with Tim and John Frick.
Oh yeah,
the Men in Black around Point Pleasant.
Right.
When did they first start doing that? And what was kind of the inspiration for them doing that?
You mean for the festival, where they dress up? Or
what was the inspiration? So they do it for the festival every year? Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, they. I met them guys right after my first book came out. I had no clue who they were. They came into my record store with a camera and started taking a bunch of pictures of me. I was sitting there doing book work on my laptop or whatever, and I was like, "What are you guys doing? Who are you?" They're like, "Oh, we went to sign our book and all that," and I got to talking to them, and then after that, when the festivals came up every year, they would just show up. I mean, I just let them do whatever they want to do and stuff, but and they when these film crews come, they know who they are. These film producers are like, what about those 2 brothers? We need some extras and stuff like that. So they're kind of like celebrities, but they're a really big help during the festival and stuff. I mean, they're really dedicated to helping out and everything.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, and if people want to learn more about the festival, they can. You have a website that's dedicated to the.
Yeah, Mothman Festival.
That's www.mothmanfestival.com, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also mothmuseum.com, and that's a little bit about the museum, and then there's the mother site, which is mothmanlives.com.
Yeah, I've been to the site, and they're excellent sites, and I suggest people look at them.
It's so hard to keep up with everything, because the museum's kind of taken off and everything. So.
Yeah. my final question before I get to the Monster Quest update is referring to this Indrid Cold individual. Was he real, or was he a creation of John Keel? And does anybody, if he did exist, does anybody know who he was?
That happened in Mineral Wells, which is about an hour away from here, during the same time as the Mothman stuff. And you had Woodrow Derenberger, was a TV repairman or whatever, driving down the interstate there, Route 77, said this object landed in the road, and guy got out, walked up to him, and you know, I talked to Keel there probably a couple years ago and asked him about, you know, because he went and interviewed him, and he wasn't real impressed with his story. Now, that's what he told me, but in his book, I mean, you know, he goes on and on about this encounter and everything. And of course, they pushed that a lot in the movie and everything. So that's just another area of that Mothman story that some people aren't real familiar with or anything. I had never had a chance to talk to any of his family, Woodrow Derenberger's family, but there's some tapes that exist, interview tapes, and I think Susan Shepard has those. She comes to the festival every year. She grew up with Woodrow Derenberger's kids or whatever and stuff, but you know, I never really researched that Indrid Cold in too much, but Keel told me that he didn't see a lot of validity in his story. You know, that's maybe changed his mind. I don't know.
That's interesting. Okay, now for the all-important Monster Quest update. The new anyway, the all-important Monster Quest update. The new season begins this Wednesday, 9 Eastern, 8 Central, and they'll be focusing. The first episode will be on great white sharks, 2 hours in length.
That's cool.
Of course, yeah. I don't see how sharks are a cryptid, but anyway.
Yeah. They don't say anything about the Mothman.
And then the second episode will be titled Hillbilly Beast. It'll be about our big hairy friends, and we're focusing on the Appalachian Mountains, the sightings that have been going on in those areas.
Huh. That's interesting. Very interesting.
And then the third episode will be about giant pythons in America.
Oh, boy. Down in Florida, no doubt.
Yeah. And I'm not sure what ones are going to...
Yeah, I usually email the producer. The producer I've emailed a couple times and asked her, you know, how things were coming along with the Mothman episode. And she said that she figured it would air in the spring, like in April or May. But I don't know, you know, that they change stuff all the time. So
I know Jaime Avalos is also supposed to be on this season. And also, I think the Chupacabra lady's supposed to be on this season, too. So we've got several.
They did one episode, I think, in the second season on the Chupacabra.
Oh, don't tell me I missed it. Well, thank God for Rerun.
She was
I believe they had the lady.
Yeah.
She was National Geographic, wasn't she?
Oh, wait a minute. Everybody's running all over everybody.
Sorry, I need a light to see who's talking. I believe she is on Nat Geo, isn't she? National Geographic.
Oh, was it National Geographic?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it was National Geographic. Yep, you're correct.
Oh, well, I got that wrong. Okay.
Too many to keep up with.
I know.
That's right. There's a lot. There's a whole lot to keep up with.
And the lady that y'all had on a couple of weeks ago was on that Monster Quest, the one about the Chupacabra, I believe.
Well, see, that's what I was thinking. She said that there was a Monster Quest episode coming up and that she was on it. But maybe I need to go back and listen to that show again.
She's also doing the National Geographic.
Okay, that's right. That's absolutely right. I remember that.
One more news item. speaking of National Geographic, it's interesting you mentioned that. There is an upcoming brand new Bigfoot show from National Geographic coming up. If you, all those of you who have the National Geographic channel on your cable system or maybe on your satellite, there will be an all-new Bigfoot show. It'll air on Sunday, January 24th at 7 Eastern, 6 Central. Unfortunately,
is it going to be like a series?
Nite Callers.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
How dare they? We're going to have to send them a letter.
I think it's a series. It's a new series they're starting called American Paranormal, I think. And they're going to focus on Bigfoot, and there's a short 5-minute preview with Dr. Jeff Meldrum that you can find online.
Okay.
So, that'll be in, let's see, today's the 10th. I think it'll be in 2 weeks, I believe. 2 weeks from tonight.
Okay. Well, Henry, we thank you so much.
Oh, sure.
Go ahead.
This is
sorry.
not the older one. This is not the older one with Janice Carter and Igor Bortsev on all fours imitating a Sasquatch killing a deer, by the way.
No, you didn't. Oh, goodness. Oh, okay. Well, Henry, we appreciate you calling in and keeping us updated, and you had some terrific questions. Thank you for calling.
Yeah, it's good talking to you, Henry.
Uh-huh. I'll take Bye.
Bye-bye. We do have a question from the chat from Andy Drew. Question for Jeff. Have you ever heard of a Mothman-type creature reported in other countries? And I think you answered this.
Yeah, Serbia
earlier.
and Croatia. I got emails from some people in a village over there that said this giant bird, flying over the village and stuff, and a lot from down in New Mexico, places like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there again, it's just it's hard for me to really be able to validate anything, without talking to them or anything like that. But yeah, it's. I think a lot of people just read about all the similarities and the descriptions and things like that, and then are like, well, that could have been what we saw, like the couple that you talked about there that down here in Virginia, that story that they sent and everything.
Yes.
It's a big world out there. So.
Well, Jeff, has there ever been any analogy or comparison of the Mothman and the gargoyles that appear on medieval cathedrals?
That's a good question because I've talked to a few people. Some of those witnesses said that that the one lady that described it as a dirty gray look to it. She said she watched it run up the side of that North Power Plant, and she said it perched up there like a gargoyle. That's what she told me. So I'm glad you brought that up. And she said it just stared at him. It just stared at him like, what are you doing here? This is my territory and stuff. But yeah, I always, as a matter of fact, we've got a few things in the museum that are basically like gargoyle type things and stuff. But we used to play it was an old DVD of a movie I think called Gargoyle.
Yes,
because it had a lot. It had a lot of those scenes where it was flying and chasing cars and all that stuff,
Yes, and the thrust of that, as I recall, I saw that many years ago.
Yeah.
It was that these beings lay eggs, and the period for the eggs is something like 500-600 years. So they all die off, and then they regenerate in that time.
Yeah.
And it was quite interesting in that way, in that it's completely fantasy and farce, but
right.
But still, it could explain an outbreak of sightings.
Yeah, a lot of people don't really talk about the gargoyle stuff. Most of the people that I interviewed, I asked them, did they have any facial features or anything? Could you tell? And they said their attention was drawn to the eyes. They said they really couldn't make out any like a mouth or one of them said it looked like it had little nostril type things and stuff, but no fangs or anything like that. But they said it, it had the brightest red eyes that they'd ever seen.
Well, you can't blame them for that. I mean, that's going to stick in your mind.
Yeah, and that's what they remembered. That's what they remember. Now, but there's been a few that I've talked to, and one lady, Marcella Bennett. And a lot of these people passed away just in the past year or two. I was just on Facebook there before I got on the phone with you all, and Bob Bosworth, who's in my second book, he passed away just 2 days ago.
Oh,
it's but Marcella Bennett, she's the one that had the 2-year-old daughter that took off running into the house with her and tripped and fell, and she saw it face to face, but she said it didn't have red eyes. She said it just glared at me, but she said I couldn't really make out red eyes or anything. But she thought it was just a man dressed up in khaki clothes, is what she told me at first.
Did the eyes glow independently of any light source?
I think when you see a possum at night, I think it was sort of like that nocturnal.
Okay.
I don't think they were like glowing beams of red light, like coming, but it was just I don't know what, maybe with the headlights of the car hit it or whatever, it had that red look to it. I don't think they were actually glowing, but they all described those red eyes.
Yeah.
Luke, do you have a question?
I've had. Yeah, well, actually, kind of a story, but what happened was that when you're doing Bigfoot research, you ask people, have you seen anything big and large, and they might, and they say, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I have, but when they start describing this large thing that they've seen, it's not what you're expecting it to be.
Right.
And I've actually gathered reports of people seeing what I would describe as a Mothman here in the state of Texas. Yeah, and it's very interesting. And one of those people was my wife.
Oh,
That's why I'm interested in that's why I'm interested in the Mothman. But she's seen this. She was coming home from work one night, and she's seen this dark figure standing next to the fence row.
Yeah. And
said she just drove by, and up it came, and it glided next to the car, and then she kind of made a turn, and it went off over a field. And the other one was a little bit more scary. The lady was driving home at night on a country road, and she said she seen something black in the road. So it wasn't standing; it was laying down. And so she approached it. It just shot straight up into the air, and it actually flew next to the car. And her dad was sick, and they were just coming home from the hospital. And this thing actually attached itself to the side of the car.
Wow.
And she said she turned and looked. Her brother was in the back seat with her dad, and it terrified them.
I can imagine. So,
but she described the eyes as being green, and almost described a beak on it. Yes.
Yeah.
And so
now, none of the people I talked to described a beak, because that was always, if it was a bird, everybody say, well, did it have a beak? And none of them
was
said
this in Texas, Luke?
Yeah, this was, as a matter of fact, it was where I used to live.
No.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Well, the funny thing about it is, the funny thing about that, you were talking about UFOs and weird things happening around the areas where these Mothman sightings take place. Well, this area that I'm talking about is one of those areas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, there's some pretty big birds, actual birds in this area, but it's like John Keel said on that one documentary, they had, one guy said it was nothing but a barn owl, and Keel said, I've seen some owls in my life, but never one that stood 6 foot tall, you know. And he just felt that was just a slap in the face of those people that had the courage to come out and tell everybody what they saw. It's just sort of like, they're just trying to squelch, anything that they're talking about and stuff. But I mean, I've talked to enough people to know that, there again, if it was 3 or 4 people, I could see where people would be pretty skeptical of the whole thing. But when you got over 100 reported sightings, and like I said, probably another 100 or maybe even 200 that just said, I'm not going to go to the police about this, I'll just keep it to myself, you know. But, you know, whenever those books came out and everything, I started getting, you know, visits from people that came in and said, look, you know, I don't want to do a TV interview or even an interview with you, but this is what I saw. And, you know, I get a lot of that at the museum especially. You know, you don't even have to advertise to get people to come and talk to you. But then, you know as well as I do, when you start getting these TV shows and documentaries, there's a lot of people that want that exposure, and they'll come and, you know, they'll tell you stuff, and it's like, are they just wanting to get on TV or what, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of weed through it. It's the way I always looked at it. The ones that don't want to talk to me about it are usually the ones that, you know, are keeping something, you know, secret, or they don't want to, you know, be bothered with it or anything. Now the ones that come running in and, hey, you know, I'll do interviews, I'll do TV shows, whatever, you know, call me, here's my number and stuff. I usually don't mess with them.
There you go.
But, yeah. So it's those ones that won't return your phone calls, just like the ones that in my book, you know, they backed out there at the last minute, and I thought, man, you know.
Oh, I bet. That's just what a disappointment. But
yeah, and I still see them. I still see them, and, you know, I'm like, sure you don't want to. Nope, I don't want to talk about it anymore. So,
let's talk about something else. Quit asking me.
Yeah, I know. You know, you don't want to be a pest about it or anything.
Yeah.
But,
well,
you know.
Here's a question for you, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know the military was there at the TNT site.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Now, was there toxic waste left?
I was going to ask that question, but that's a good question.
TNT area was an EPA cleanup super-funded site in the 80s. They took off about 3 inches of topsoil off of that, the ground area up there. You know, that was always a speculation, too, you know, that it was maybe some sort of a mutated bird or animal, you know, that got into some of it. Because when World War II ended, they basically just buried everything up there. You know, Jeeps, trucks, whatever, equipment, they just ditched it and left it. And then, you know, that was in 1945, and then, you know, 20 years later, and then, you know, it just got worse and worse and worse. But, you know, there was always, you bring up that military stuff, too, a lot of UFO sightings here along the Ohio River. And Keel had contacted Wright-Patterson Air Force Base numerous times, but there was always the theory that this was during Vietnam, and Wright-Patterson would come and fly maneuvers along the Ohio River, but they wouldn't tell anybody they were doing this because, you know, the terrain on the Ohio River was so much like Vietnam. And they would come down, and they may have been messing with stealth technology at that time. Who knows? But you know, you get these women, these older women that live by themselves in the farmhouses, and you know, see this light appear on the hillside, and then zoom, it's gone. You know, and they're calling the police and everything, and that could have been the case. You know, right? So, you know. But yeah, the military, you know, National Guard was up there, and it was a highly protected site during the war. Now during the 60s, you know, everybody and their brother was up there, and those buildings, you know, they tore those down because there were so many kids in there ratting around, and you know, a couple guys fell off the top, and it was just a big liability for the state. But if you go on YouTube, there's a guy that we used a few of his pictures in the first book, and his name's Don McDade, but you might want to jot this down. He just posted on there a few weeks ago. If you want to get an idea of how massive and how big that North Power Plant was, I think you type in, Mothman TNT plant as a search word, and he's got about 10-minute video on there. He shot back in 92 or 93.
Wow.
Him and his buddies were in there messing around, and they shot a bunch of video inside of that building. And you can get an idea of how massive that catwalks, concrete pillars, and everything. And that's where they say that most people, you know, saw it. in and around that
Sounds
building.
like a perfect habitat for a large...
Exactly, yeah, it's eerie. He put theme music behind it, sound effects music and all that. It's pretty cool. But he just put it on there about a week ago. Yeah. Check that out and see.
No doubt.
You don't see footage like that every day, And back when I was a kid in junior high and high school, and I'd see those buildings up there, I had no clue all the history they had, And then now that they're gone, and we do those bus tours, I was like, man, I wish those buildings were still here so you could get an idea of what these people were, seeing and stuff. But they tore them down.
And well,
we
Jeff,
have a question.
Go ahead, Lori. No, go ahead. Take the question.
Hold on, my screensaver. Oh, okay. Let's see. Question from Spin Dave. He asked, are the wings webbed like a bat, and did anyone notice the legs? If so, how did they describe them?
Anybody notice what?
The legs.
Oh, yeah. Most of the people that I talked to, said the legs were muscular. They weren't like stork legs or bird legs or anything.
What about feet?
Not too many people mentioned anything about feet.
But the wings were webbed like a bat.
That's debatable too. There was some said it had wings like a bird with feathers, and others mentioned, and there again, I think it was just the excitement of the moment. They were, if it's just a 5 or 10 second deal and stuff, but some people did say that it kind of, the wings went out real quick, almost like like bat wings and stuff. So that's a tough one right there.
Okay, go ahead, Luke. I know you had one.
Yeah, I did, and it was. I was going to ask you, Jeff, when is the Mothman Festival this year?
We always have that festival the third weekend in September. I think this year it'll be the 18th and 19th.
Okay.
Of what month?
That'll be
September.
Yeah, we always have it in September.
Hucklebug wants to know, what was the most recent sighting that you've heard of?
Probably just last week. I get emails constantly,
Wow, and it was current?
Yeah, I get a lot of emails.
Do you know what state it was in?
Not real sure. I get so many of them. Now, the last one that I documented in my books would have been 89, something like 88 or 89. Now, that would have been in the TNT area. So I'm not real versed on different states and things like that, but I'm pretty much concentrated on, what all happened here in Galplis and Point Pleasant. And there were sightings across the river, here at that time, too. And some people thought that whatever it was flying across the river and going right back over to where the TNT area was and stuff. So.
Well, I know that you had mentioned at the beginning of the show that you were going to educate us on the difference between the movie and the real truth about the Mothman. Can you kind of go into that?
Yeah, like I said, that movie was based more on a modern times. They didn't base it back in the 60s, and there was a few things in there. In the movie, the sheriff was a woman. That was never happened in Point Pleasant. I've never known of a woman sheriff in Point Pleasant. Keel was portrayed in that movie as a young version of Keel and then an older version of Keel. Alexander Leak, the older guy, which is Keel spelled backwards. And I talked to John Keel about that movie and stuff, and he never really went on about it, how great it was or how bad it was. He was just, he just like, well, it is what it is, and hope they do good with it, But like I said, the movie didn't really have any actual physical sightings or anything. Now, I'm glad you brought that up because there is another movie that I've been getting emails and links from it that was being shot in Louisiana called Mothman. I don't know if anybody's heard about that or not.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
right next door to us.
And it's not a low budget film because we looked into it and checked and it's a pretty big budget movie. Now I don't know any more details other than that, but it was being shot in Louisiana over the summer. So I haven't heard anything else about it, but you can probably Google it. But I know that they were filming some of it in Louisiana. I had never been contacted by anybody any of it. But it looked to me like it was set more in the 60s. I mean, just judging by some of the set pictures and stuff like that. So
you think it might be a remake of Mothman Prophecy?
Well, not so much a remake, but just more of a different movie in itself,
Uh-huh.
Without the prophecies. It might be just about like a Jeepers Creepers type thing.
What about lost time? Did any of the witnesses experience lost time?
Well, that was another big thing about the movie, with Richard Gere, where he drove and drove and drove and then couldn't remember. Keel never mentioned anything about that to me. I've asked a few of the witnesses and stuff. They never really talked a lot about that, It could have happened, but I always made it a point to have a little list of questions for Keel every chance I got to talk to him, But usually whenever I would talk to him, it would be everything but Mothman,
Uh-huh.
I think he was just a little burnt out talking about it, doing interviews. But he would call me here at home once in a while, which I got a big thrill out of that, But he would ask about the festival and about the museum and things like that. He was interested in hearing how that stuff was coming along. So I thought that was always neat that he took an interest in everything like that. And he came to a couple of the festivals too. We actually
did any of the witnesses ever claim that they had tragedy after they had a Mothman sighting? They did. So it was like a harbinger of doom.
Well, Linda Scarberry, that was the main one I think about that, because her marriage fell apart and she just had kind of a rough life after it,
So you think it was brought on because of the stress of having something so supernatural happen to them?
Yeah, and if you watch the interviews with her and stuff, she's really timid, real soft-spoken, and every time I see that one interview with her, she says, I just wish somebody else would have saw it instead of me, She said, I just wish somebody else would have seen it. So
that as far as being saying something bad happens. After my wife had seen what she's seen, her mother was 3 months later. Her mother was diagnosed with cancer. I mean, so that you never know that.
Right.
It's kind of odd the way things happen.
Yeah.
So,
and I know.
Just coincidence.
Yeah, and I think some of those people just don't want to talk about it anymore because they think maybe there is something to it, but
what do the people of Point Pleasant think about the Mothman now?
It's they're used to it. You know what I mean? It's like somebody who lives by the ocean. They never swim in it, but somebody like me from West Virginia wants to go to the ocean and swim, and they want to come to the mountains. You know what I mean? And it's you have your skeptics, that are around town, and that's understandable. But most of them have the opinion as like, I think those people saw something. I believe them. I don't know what it was, but it definitely scared them. Every now and then you'll get the ones that'll start harping about how crazy they were, and they were all drunk or high or one of the two and stuff. So
right.
And I think that's just because they're embarrassed a little bit about all the attention that it's gotten over the years. But it's been a good thing because the people they'll come to the museum, the festival, and Point Pleasant has a real rich history, not just with Mothman stuff. They've got a multi-million-dollar river museum there. They have a farm museum, historical sites. So it helps, with that because the kids might want to come to the Mothman museum. The parents might want to go down to the river museum and stuff. But I don't think it's hurt any, for the people to be curious. And way before the movie came out, there were a lot of people that came to Point Pleasant, to investigate all this stuff. You just didn't have the internet and the cell phones and all that, but somehow the story got out there, and people were coming from all over. I mean, doing investigations and documentaries and things like that.
Well, I have to ask you, as a teenager, did you go up to TNT and sit out there and wait on looking for the Mothman?
I didn't. I was talking to a buddy of mine the other night. I went to school with him and everything, and the only time I remember going up there was on prom night. We didn't go to the prom, but we we found a few people that did go to the prom, and we had the masks and all that kind of stuff, and we put a little scare into them and everything. But and, you know, and I never even thought at that time, you know, like that I would be doing 2 books on it and doing these TV shows and the museum and all that, you know. Even reading Keel's book when I was in junior high, you know, I thought this is kind of neat, you know, this is all about the people that I know and everything. But but I think the older that I got, the more interested I became in it, because it was like, you know, this is kind of an elaborate story, you know.
It's part of Point Pleasant's
Yeah.
legend.
Yeah,
you know, it's part of their history, actually.
It is, and there again, you know, there's some people that embrace it, and there's a few that just laugh about it and think it's a bunch of silliness and everything. But you know, if you just get a chance to talk to some of those witnesses, and you know, after 40-some years, I thought, well, you know, if they were making that up, somebody surely would have came out by now and explained how they did it and who was involved with it. But nobody's ever claimed that. You know, you get a few people that want to kind of take the credit and say, well, that was my uncle or my brother that was up there dressed up scaring people and all that. And I'm sure there were people doing that after the fact. I mean, what red-blooded teenager wouldn't want to go up there and try to scare people, you know? I just don't think that's, you know, the case for those people that were seeing it. I don't think it was somebody dressed up or anything.
So you've never had any paranoid moments about the Men in Black since you put out 2 books?
Not really. No, I had an IRS audit one time, if that comes close, you know. But that scared me probably more than anything else. You know, and they did walk into my store too.
Well, speaking of your book, where can people get your books?
Well, you can get those books on mothmanlives.com. You know, we do the PayPal and all that kind of stuff. Amazon has them, and some of the bigger bookstores, you know, may have it. You know, I get people that email me and say, I found your book in Seattle, Washington, in a bookstore. You know, so it's out there. I mean, but you know, the most common place to get it is, you know, mothmanlives.com or Amazon. You'll see it pop up on eBay and everything. So,
great. Well, if anybody's out there interested, go to mothmanlives.com.
Yeah. Well, we got a whole bunch of stuff on there too. You know, that different things.
And
you
give tours also. Am I correct? You give tours.
Yeah. We a couple festivals ago, I thought it would be, because I always had people coming in the museum saying, you know, we don't know how to get up there, and is there any guided tours or anything? So we started doing that at the festival, and then it kind of trickled in, and you know, especially through the summer, you know, we do it quite a bit. This time of the year, with the weather being kind of bad, it's hard really to advertise a tour, and then it gets snowed out or whatever. But we post the dates on the website there for when we're doing them, and it's about a 75-minute tour. We go up there and go, you know, the TNT, kind of retrace the routes of the witnesses and go into the igloos and all that stuff. So it's pretty cool. It's been pretty successful.
Oh, that's interesting. JB, do you have any questions? We're getting down to the last 5 minutes. If anyone has any questions in the chat.
Yeah, most of my questions have been addressed very, very well indeed. This has been most interesting, I think.
Well, it's always nice to have people asking interesting questions, you know, like the gargoyles and stuff, and you know, so it kind of keeps me on my toes a little bit too. But,
well, yeah, that's definitely a good question.
It just seemed to be a normal parallel there.
Yeah.
I think it's just so neat that you grew up in a place like that had such an interesting thing happen, you know, and you know, you probably forget about it actually at times. If it weren't for the museum, you probably forget it ever happened.
Well,
often, you know,
a big piece of history, you know, the museum, because we got all kinds of stuff in there. But you know, I don't know. It seems like the older I get, the more I'm interested in historical stuff, you know, and just thinking, you know, I was only 5 when it happened, but I kind of wish I would have been a little older so I could, you know, remember it and stuff. And you know, I end up talking to people that are older than me, and like, you know, what do you remember about this? For example, my cousin, he's about 10, 12 years older than me, but I mentioned when they came back into town, they stopped at that little hamburger joint, Tony's Drive-In, and told him, you know, the owner about what happened. My cousin was actually in there eating when they came in, and you know, he told me all about it. He said, man, they were you know, scared, and he said everybody got in their cars and drove up to the TNT area, you know, and stuff like that. So, and then the lady that came and talked to me about, you know, treating them for shock.
Yes.
You know, so that's you know.
After the book came out, you're finding that, you know, that's the way it always happens.
Yeah.
Uncle Buck wants to know if you've ever seen one.
No, I haven't. I get asked that a lot. You know, I've never really. I've just talked to a lot of people that have, and I think it's worked out pretty good because they know that I'm honest. You know, with my books. I mean, it's word for word, and I'm not going to add anything or cut anything out or anything like that. So, and that was the big worry that Linda had when she found out that movie was coming out, because she thought, you know, nobody's really going to know the real story when that movie comes out. So that was a catalyst for her to have her story told. You know, she wanted to make sure that people knew the real story rather than just watching that movie thinking, you know, that's what really happened. So,
well, it might be history, but it's ongoing history.
Yeah, that's true. And who knows? Somebody might see it again tomorrow and get a picture of it or whatever. You know?
They will, and I always get a kick out of the skeptics and especially from the scientific community. And the explanations they have, sometimes the explanations are harder to believe. Their explanations are harder to believe than the real story. But they will cry out a mistaken identity for what? I mean, you're talking.
I know.
I saw an 8-foot person with wings. Yeah, that was a mistaken identity.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of those people don't want to believe something like that.
Oh well, it messes with their paradigm.
Exactly.
I don't. Yeah. It messes with my paradigm, definitely.
Well, there's a whole lot out there that we don't understand.
Right.
And it doesn't serve anything to write it off just summarily.
Yeah, and then you end up calling a bunch of people kooks when they're not. You know.
Well, yeah, you weren't there. You didn't experience what they did.
Right. Right. I agree. Yeah.
Luke, do you have anything else to say? We are coming down to 1 minute remaining.
Well, just that I am so very glad that Jeff was here with us tonight on the show. What a great guest.
I appreciate you having me. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
This has been.
And I appreciate you coming on too.
This has been very informative.
Well, that's good. Maybe we can do something there before the festival or whatever. You know, give you a little briefing down to the festival.
I'd welcome that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just have to email me about a week before, make sure I know, you know, so I can keep my schedule straight, you know.
Oh,
okay.
You bet.
Well, we really do appreciate you coming on the show. It's been so educational, informative, interesting, scary, and I'll be truthful. I found out more than I wanted to know. Thank you, Jeff, for coming on the show.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Not only that, Laurie, but the one Luke saw is headed toward Nacogdoches.
Shut up.
Well, thanks for having me on the show.
You're very welcome, and we'll hope you come back sometime.
I will.
We'll have you on right before the festival. Yes, that way it'll. So, you know, we have a wide audience. It's all over the United States, so there will be people, you know, from that part of the country that may not know about the festival, and they may find that interesting. So.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, well, I guess we took enough of your time up, Mr.
Wamsley. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Jeff, so much.
Okay, good luck. Stay in touch.
All right, stay warm.
Okay,
all
you
right.
too. Bye.
Yes, stay warm. It's probably not warm up his way.
No. See you later.
All right.
Good night.
Everyone, if you're still listening, next week we're going to have the Georgia-Alabama Bigfoot Research Group on. Mr. Anthony Yawn, who's the founder of that group, is going to be on the show. And we are going with the series, researchers from every state, and we're going to be approaching the Alabama-Georgia state of Alabama and Georgia. So anyway, be sure to join us next week for that. And, JB, thank you as always.
thank you. I'm sorry to have to barge in on you this way.
You know what? You are not barging in, not one bit.
It's the Blog Talk's fault. They don't give me the
I'm
audio.
glad Blog Talk is doing it. Yeah. I am glad it's doing it.
Thank you.
Well, anyway, I guess I will let you go. And
take care.
I have got to go get my coffee. So we'll see everyone next week. Bye, baby.
Bye-bye.